An abstract fact out there that monkeyboy's channel is the best. Intersubjectively. Mind independently. Mind dependently. Subscribe now.
Hello, hello.
Hey, what's up? You there, Jack? Or
Here, but it's kind of noisy here.
oh, okay. Then, well, you can tell me how bad. Do you think you could talk with them with the noise, or do you think it would be too much?
I probably need a few minutes.
Yeah, it kind of sounds too loud. All right. Hey, affordable. Do you have an argument or evidence that God exists?
Yeah, the lack of duplication of our solar system is my biggest argument.
What does that mean exactly?
Pardon me?
Like, what does that mean? So we're clear. The lack of duplication of the solar system.
After the Big Bang Theory, universe expanded. If the probability of the Earth sitting in the habitable zone was not astronomically improbable, then there would be another duplicate of our solar system somewhere in my opinion, in our foreseeable reach of being able to see and monitor it.
You're saying that you would expect. You're saying if God didn't exist, you would expect that there would be an identical solar system.
No, not an identical solar system, but a setup that would sustain life. I want to see evidence that this wasn't just.
You're saying there's no other solar system that sustains life.
Well, not like ours. I'm not saying that there isn't some fossilized shit laying around somewhere, but I'm talking about the real deal. I'm talking about animals, plants, humans. I want to see it. I want to see.
You're claiming that. Okay, but are you claiming those aren't in other solar systems?
No, I mean I can't do that because we can't see that far. But I'm just saying within.
Okay, well that's fine. I'm just clarifying yes or no if that's what you're saying. I don't want the extra stuff. So if that's not what you're saying, then what about the fact that if all you're saying is that there's not known life in other solar systems, how's that a reason that God exists?
Probability.
What about probability?
Well, there's too many anomalies. There's too many things that had to come about where the mathematical probability was extremely low that it would happen by chance to make our Earth sit in the habitable zone, elliptically floating around the sun to sustain life.
But I don't get what your point is. How are we getting to God?
We're getting to God as
like what facts is supposed to be evidence for God? What fact exactly are you saying is evidence for
probability?
God?
You know, if it didn't happen by
fact,
the only other probability would then happen.
So we're clear. Obviously, what you said it doesn't answer. Maybe you misspoke. Let's just say that because it's obviously doesn't make any sense. So I'm gonna try it again. What is the fact that is supposed to be evidence for theism that a God exists?
I'm telling
probability
you,
isn't a fact; it's a noun, right? So
no.
So yes, probability is a noun. Are you joking?
Listen, you could add grammar into this, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying
I know, but of course it matters because the question I'm asking you. Well, hold on. I'm asking you what proposition that you think is true that offers reasons to believe theism is true. So if you're not giving me a proposition, you're obviously not answering. Evidence are propositions, obviously, unless you didn't know that. So when you don't give me a proposition, you're not giving me evidence. So you gave me a noun, which aren't propositions. I just want to be more clear. Maybe you're saying there's some proposition you think is true on the basis of probability, but that's not what I'm asking you. Just tell me what the fact is.
The fact is what I can see.
That's okay. So you're saying, well, that's not a fact, right? So what are you saying? There's a specific fact about what you can't see? Like I can't see life on other planets. Is that the claim?
Correct.
Like what? Okay, so you can't see life on other planets. Okay, and why is that an evidence for God existing?
The evidence is the fact that if I can't see a duplicate, I'm not going to assume that this happened by chance.
Okay, but that's not what I'm asking you, right? I'm asking you why the fact you can't see life on other planets, why does that make God existing more likely, like, rather than if we didn't know that fact?
It's intelligent design. If I walk into a room and I see a painting, I know it didn't happen by chance. Somebody intelligent had to paint it, or a car, somebody had to make it.
So what are you saying there's a designer for?
Well, it's just too beautiful.
I don't say it is too beautiful. The question is, what is the it referring to, right? Like, imagine I said, what's the evidence for atheism? And I said, the fact it's not designed. What is it? It's just like you can like it's not beautiful, so that's the reason to think it's not designed. What? You're just saying it's not beautiful. Like what are you referring to, right? It doesn't. You're not being helpful here. Like what is the design thing? What is the thing that's beautiful? That's evidence for design. What is the it?
The earth and everything in it.
Okay, so you're saying the fact that Earth is beautiful is evidence it's designed?
The math that goes into it, the science. There's too
Hold on,
many.
okay, but you gotta like I understand there's a lot of stuff you want to get on your plate, but I don't ask you questions for you to avoid them, right? It's going to be very unproductive if I'm asking a clarifying question and you're being evasive. Now, maybe you don't understand the question, and that's why you maybe are reframing or something. But tell me you don't understand what I'm asking you, and don't just avoid it, right? Because then that just gives me a signal that you're just being evasive, whether intentfully or not. So I'm asking you if you're saying the fact things are beautiful on Earth is evidence for God existing, yes or no?
That's one part of it. I said the science that goes behind it.
Okay, so yes, that's one reason, right?
That's one, yes.
Okay, well, before we get to other reasons, let's kind of see why this is a reason at all. So why is it the fact that the world appears beautiful to you a reason I think it's designed?
As I said, if I walked into a room and seen a painting that was just outstanding, okay, I would say it was intelligently designed. If I seen a car engine, the hood was
okay, but look, this is common rhetoric that isn't productive. Now, you might be saying you're justified in thinking paintings have painters, and you're saying that for similar reasons, you have a reason to think that the beauty is designed or something of the earth. If that's the thing you're saying, well, what facts make them similar? Like, what are the reasons? Right? That's not telling me anything.
Well, evolution does not give me enough justification.
Yeah, but we don't need to talk about evolution, right? Unless that's a part of your reason. I think it's designed.
No, it's my counter argument.
What do you mean counter argument?
It's the only other theory behind it. So I'm looking at both sides and I'm saying, well,
no, that's not. Look, can you be an atheist? Can you be an atheist and deny evolution?
No.
Wrong. Of course you can. Look, atheism is just the thesis that God doesn't exist. It's not a specific biological commitment. It's not the view I have that biological commitments. Right? Evolution is a type of biological story. Atheism doesn't tell you anything about your biological beliefs, scientific beliefs. You can have even very crazy kind of views, like you deny science altogether. You're like a nihilist or a limitivist about scientific programs and projects, right? You think science should be abandoned as a methodology. You can have views like that and think God doesn't exist. So no, that's not telling me anything about why I think it's designed. Now, it is true if these were the two alternatives, right? It's either X or Y, and I have reason to think not Y. Therefore, I think X. That's just not true here.
What is X, Y? What is Z?
I'm saying if it's only X or Y, then if you had reasons to think Y is false, that's reason to think X is true. And that's what it sounds like you're doing. You're saying it's either God or evolution. I have reason to think evolution is false, therefore God, but it's not God or evolution. Right? That's a mistake. Atheism doesn't tell you anything about evolution. Right? Even if there aren't very developed, tentative other biological theories other than evolution standing today in biology, doesn't tell you anything about how theism is more likely. In fact, most theists today do accept like evolution, which kind of seems strange. But that aside, the fact that you have qualms with evolution, that's not qualms against atheism.
True, but I've got to make a
justification for theism.
I've got to make a decision.
Yeah, so look, I see. So your claim is the world. You perceive the world in a way where it exemplifies beauty, and for that reason, that's designed. And I don't see why the fact it seems beautiful or it is beautiful to you is a reason I think it's designed.
The simple fact that virtually anything that is made beautiful is intelligently designed.
Okay, anything made, right? Made there seems to just smuggle in design, unless you mean something other than designed by made. But why is the fact something is beautiful a reason I think it's designed? Not that it's made beautiful, it just is beautiful. Why is that a reason I think it's designed?
It's less likely it happened by chance.
Look, do you think God's beautiful?
I've never seen God, so I can't say one way or the other.
There's no sense in which you would say he's beautiful?
I would hypothesize he is, but I can't say for certain.
Well, it doesn't have to be visually. There can be many senses in which he's beautiful. So you wouldn't say in any sense he's beautiful?
In my opinion, yes.
Because look, if God's beautiful, then he requires a designer. Do you think God's not beautiful? Look, here, I'll just tell you the consequences of the two view. If God is not beautiful, and he makes design, then it's consistent that beauty comes from non-design. So that's not a reason to think there's a designer. And if you do think that God himself is beautiful and that beauty comes from a designer, and that the designer is beautiful, then you get an infinite regress of designers, because then God is designed by a designer, and then that designer is also beautiful, right? Ad infinitum. So it's either it doesn't offer you any reasons to think theism, or you get an infinite series of gods.
Well, it doesn't take away from the fact that it wasn't accidentally done.
Okay, well, hold on, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about the two consequences, and I'm asking which of the two. Right now, you're in a dilemma, right? I'm asking. It seems both avenues you take are going to be a threat to you, right? Either you're going to be committed to an overly inflated view of gods, right? You think there's infinite gods, or you would just have to concede that what you're giving is not a reason to think there's a god. Right? In one case, you're violating parsimony; the other, it's not. It's just impotent.
I take neither.
So God is it's and that's incoherent. It's either true or false that God's beautiful. That what you just said is it's neither true or false. The proposition God is beautiful, but propositions are either true or false, right?
Right, but
like John walked his dog today is either true or false. There's no other option. So I don't know what you mean by neither. That's just straightforwardly incoherent.
Okay, I'm going to say he is.
Okay, now if God is beautiful, then he has a designer.
I can't say if he was or he wasn't designed. I mean,
that just follows. That follows by your own life. Remember, you said the fact something is beautiful, that is enough reason to think that it has a designer. You said God is beautiful, so by your own lights, that's enough reason to think God has a designer.
I think there's a big difference between matter, created matter, things, structures, planets, things like that, as opposed to a deity. I don't know how you're just
okay. So you're making a revision, and you're saying only material beauty requires a designer.
Correct.
Okay, why would I accept that?
Well, I mean, that's just I don't know enough about God, nor does anyone else, to be able to make claims against God.
We're not talking about God for the moment. Just like why I think the statement, if something is made of matter and beautiful, then it's designed. Why I think that statement is true.
Because I am bigger intellectually than matter. So I can explain matter, I can rationalize matter, but when you get into the spiritual realm, I don't have no information on that. So I can't rationally explain it. So I don't go into that department.
What? Look, I'm asking you why. Maybe you didn't understand what I'm saying. I'm asking why I think the statement, if a material object has beauty, then it's designed. Why I think that statement is true. Like, what's the argument or justification for that statement?
Because it's altering matter, and it's making something, okay, out of matter.
What is altering matter?
Either a deity or a human being.
Why would I think that?
Well, a painting, okay, it's altered matter. A building.
Something doesn't have to be altered. It could just have. An object can exist, not have been altered, and exemplify beauty, and it's a material object. So why think that requires a designer, or that's likely has a designer?
Well, I think God ultimately designed it the way it is, and
but obviously that's not a reason to think that, right? Because we're trying to reason to God's existence. So I'm trying to understand why because you said the reason I think God exists is the fact that if something has beauty and is material, then as a designer, and then you want to make an additional inference to the best explanation of a designer is God. So right now we're just talking about the proposition before we get to that step. I think the conditional statement, the if-then statement. So if something's composed of matter and beautiful, then it's designed. I think that statement is true. We don't need to talk about God whatsoever.
Okay. So do you have a question for me? Or
yeah, the question was why I think the if-then statement is true. If something is composed of matter and beautiful, then it's designed.
Probability.
Okay, but again, that's not. Look, imagine I said atheism is true, and I asked, "What's the justification?" I said probability, right? You could be saying I have probabilistic reasons to think atheism is true, but saying probability isn't justifying to that person atheism is true. That should be fairly obvious. So don't say probability. Give me the reasons that are probabilistic in supporting theism, right? Because if not, then I'll just use your tactic. For now on, I'll go on saying God doesn't exist. Whenever someone asks, what's the justification? I just say probability, and I wipe my hands clean. And obviously, that's like, let's be for real.
I think the argument is easier to say probability toward creation versus evolution.
Okay, but again, we're not talking about evolution right now, right? I don't know why evolution is not a part of the picture. We're talking about the conditional statement that if something is composed of matter and exemplifies beauty, then it likely has a designer. That's your claim. Now, what's the justification?
I can't wrap my head around any other way it could have happened.
Okay, but you wouldn't agree if I said, if something is composed of matter and beautiful, then it's not designed. And when someone asks us, what's the reason to think that? I say, I can't wrap my head around it not being the case. That's not a justification that material beauty requires that there isn't a designer, right? Obviously, that's not justifying that.
Well, we don't have,
So, of course,
we don't have any ability to scientifically prove or disprove spiritual matter.
okay, but we're not talking about that either, right? You kind of you have this tendency to name irrelevant stuff. I'm asking you if you understand how the inverse is illegitimate. So is the type of practice you're doing, right? Saying it's true because I can't think otherwise. That's just definitionally incredulous. And it's a kind of intuition pump. If an atheist did the same move, it slaps you in the face as, a problem. Right? So it's a problem of whoever's doing it, because it's a structural problem, not a problem of content. So when you do it in the context of God, it's as problematic, right? I think that material beauty is not designed because I don't see how it couldn't be. It's not a justification. I can't see how it couldn't be.
Well, without getting into the understanding of the spiritual matters, and getting into that, like I don't believe that you're into that, like talking about the Bible and things. Then
we can talk about the theology and the spiritualism stuff. Right now, that's just not where we're at, right? So so long as we tie up where we're at, we can eventually proceed there. But right now, we're still trying to get. Unless you want to concede you don't have a reason, then we can kind of more rapidly move past this. Thanks for the cowboy hat loan. Right now, we just want to see reason to think the statement: if something has material beauty, then it's designed. Why that statement is true.
There were about 30 mathematicians who looked at the probability of the Earth and the solar system sitting where it is.
Okay, it's on another point again. Guys, unfortunately, too, my phone's on 12%, so I might not even be able to finish with this
Sentence fragment is difficult to interpret clearly due to missing context.
Hello?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, I mean, maybe I don't know. Maybe we should just move past it. I personally don't think you have that argument or are capable of giving that argument. So maybe you just want to make a different point. Is that fair? Or
Sure.
okay, so then let's kind of take a step back. So the reason I think God exists is what?
My original statement was that we, as of yet, do not have a duplicate Earth setup like our solar system anywhere within our foreseeable sight. So it makes evolution much less probable and makes the evidence for God more probable to me.
Yeah. Okay, well, there's two things. The first thing I don't want to get into, but this is kind of straightforwardly obvious. Evolution's a biological theory, and you're talking about facts about how the cosmos are configured. So the fact the cosmos are configured on a macro level doesn't do anything to influence evolutionary theory, so that doesn't make any sense. But two is, if I grant you that, again, as I've explained earlier, we're not talking about evolution whatsoever. So if evolution were false, that doesn't do anything. Yeah. I don't even know much about evolution, so I don't know if I subscribe to it, because I don't know. I'm very scientifically naive. I don't know much about science. So it doesn't matter if I maybe do believe that scientific theory, because that doesn't influence my atheism. I'm not an atheist. Because of that, you can be an atheist and just, again, deny science altogether. You think science is fundamentally problematic or something. You can be. So none of this stuff matters about this evolution not being true. I just want to know why think the fact that there can't be a duplicate solar system, which I'm supposing you mean like a roughly similar or identical solar system somewhere else in a patch of space, that fact is evidence for God? How's that evidence for God?
It's evidence for God in that this Earth.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think the fact that if there was a duplicate, that's evidence for God? If there was identical solar systems in two regions of space?
No, it would make it, to me, less probable that there's a God.
Well, why is it that you think that, you think that, in virtue of, here's a way to put the question. In virtue of what does God...
I'll let you talk to them. I got to get my charger. Okay. I'll try and keep this live alive.
Good. Get your charge. in virtue of what is... Because you think there's some sort of you seem to think that in the absence of a designer, it would be less likely we would see something like this than if there were a designer, right? But what is it about the designer that raises the probability of that outcome?
Mathematical probability, as well as the uniqueness of this setup, where, when you look out into space in our best telescopes, as well as the telescopes that was put out into space, the Hubble, for example, we can't find anything.
You're not understanding my question.
Okay.
So look, why is it that if we saw rapid melting, we would expect to find a rapid melting of ice in an ice tray, we would infer that there was or think that it was likely that there was a source of high heat in the area, right? Because high heat is something that causes rapid melting, right? So the point about a designer is a designer might do absolutely anything, right? So it seems like you have to build in some motivations or desires in order to get some expectation that we would see a solar system like ours and it be unique. But what are those expectations? I mean, sorry, what are those properties of the designer? What are those motivations that the designer? You think the designer is a human being?
No, the reasoning behind why he designed it is human beings.
Yeah, but my question is, why is it that a designer wants human beings? Because you could imagine a designer that doesn't want human beings, right? You could imagine a designer that dislikes human beings, right? Like the last possible world it would make would be one with human beings in it, right? So
yeah, but
a designer doesn't predict anything. Doesn't predict anything at all.
Right.
Right?
Right.
You need to build in motivations. Thank you. You need to build in motivations into your hypothesis to get any kind of raised probability by an existence of a solar system like ours, right?
Okay, what about a petri dish?
What do you mean, what about a petri dish?
Yeah, I mean, he had heaven, think about it, and he created angels according to what the Bible says. Now
we're talking about the God of the Bible now?
Yeah.
Now but now you have a designer that presumably does have motivations that we know something about, right? Because presumably the Bible tells us something about what that God is like, right?
Right.
So what do you think it tells us?
Is that he's creative.
Yeah, but being creative is consistent with creating absolutely anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so there wouldn't be something more consistent with a universe, with a visible universe that only has one solar system like ours that we've seen, if that were true, right? With the hypothesis of a creator. Creator would be consistent with any observation.
Potentially. But it's not an absolute fact.
I'm trying to understand why the kind of universe we see is evidence for the God of the Bible.
Well, it had to have a habitable place for human beings that are very fragile. Consistent temperature ratios that didn't vary greatly.
Okay, so the idea is that God wants a universe. He wants to have a universe which has one tiny place where it could have human beings. Is that the idea?
Well, not the entire universe, our solar system.
Well, the point is, do you think that there's life on other planets?
I don't know because we haven't been able to get there or see that place.
But so do you think if we found life in other places, that would be evidence against God?
Potentially.
What?
Potentially, if we was able to get there and actually dialogue with them and get their theory of how they became, it would make it potentially less probable. But here's the thing: in the Big Bang theory, I would suggest that somewhere within our foreseeable site, there should have been another setup like ours if the probability wasn't. So,
kind of hard to hear you.
If the probability of this Earth was really low, then you should be able to see something within our foreseeable site that was duplicatable.
I'm trying to understand, where you're getting this from the Bible, right? Like, the point is, God could have made a world, presumably, could have made a universe the size of the Earth, right? He could have made one without vast regions of empty space, right?
Right.
Or he could have made one the size of our universe, but have it be populated by life throughout, right? So you're trying to say there's some kind of prediction that God wants a vast universe that's apparently lifeless, except for one tiny portion of it where there is life. Is that the idea?
Well, we can only hypothesize unless it is written in a way that is understandable. Now, We know, based upon what the Bible says, that there is a heaven where he exists, angels exist, and then he made an earth where humans exist. That's as far as we know. So going beyond that, you're only guessing. Okay, so this I know so far based upon what is written. So that's all I can stand on.
But what's the answer to my question?
Rephrase it again.
I was asking if the idea is that what God wanted was a universe that was vast, largely lifeless, but in one very tiny portion of it, he wanted life. Is that the idea?
That is. And I did answer it by saying that's as far as we know. That's all we know. So I would agree with that.
But that's pretty much what was already known at the time that the Bible was written, right?
Yes.
So it's not really like some kind of novel prediction, right?
Correct.
But the thing is, I don't understand why you would think that was a good explanation, right?
Well,
Because for anything that's unexplained, I could say there's an entity that wanted exactly this and had the power to do so. Voila, I have an explanation.
no. I mean, everything that goes together in the solar system is mathematically pretty improbable if left just to chance.
That you haven't explained it. Look, the point is, first of all, is it you said no when I said that for any explanation, for anything that I wanted an explanation for, I could posit an entity that desires that thing and has the capacity to do so. You said no to that, right? But I'm not seeing what's wrong with that claim.
I think there's only one entity that ascribes the power to create and has the power to do what he's doing.
Right now, what I'm trying to get you to understand is that I can construct an explanation like that for anything.
But it doesn't sound rational to me.
Could I? I'm just asking what. Well, why would it be irrational?
I think I lost you.
Why would it be irrational?
Because I don't believe in multiple gods.
All I said was that you could, for anything that's unexplained, you could say, okay, what explains it is some entity that desires that thing and has the capacity to bring it about, and you'd have an explanation.
Well, anybody could do that. You're right. And that's why we have multiple religions, Hindu, Buddhist, and things like that. But what I'm saying is I believe in the Abrahamic Christian God, and I believe in a singular God head that created all things.
The point of bringing up that you could construct explanations that way is to say that it's not interesting to have explanations like that, right?
Not to you, but I think to other people it sounds realistic.
Look, if my shoes are missing, right? If I can't find my shoes in the morning when I wake up, I could say that there are fairies that steal shoes that explain why the shoes were missing, right?
By uninteresting, by the way, he doesn't mean like he doesn't. He's just like some. It's like what he means by that is you can do that for anything in a way that doesn't. It's not getting anywhere.
Yeah, it's just substituting one mystery for another.
Right, and I can agree with you on that.
And what we're trying to understand is how people writing in a book, 2,000 years ago, that God desired a universe of the type that we see is like an interesting claim. Now, how that's any different from the shoe-stealing fairies hypothesis. That's what we're trying to understand.
Right, I get your point. My explanation for that is then I began to look into the probability, the mathematical probability of it happening against the same theory of shoe fairies stealing shoes. And the probability mathematically and scientifically of the Earth sitting on its axis, elliptically floating around the sun to sustain life over thousands of years, that sustains life for humans, plants, and animals, is less likely to happen by chance as opposed to shoe fairies.
If by chance you just mean without God, then why would we think it's less likely?
Rephrase that.
It seems you're claiming that the probability that we have a world like this, if there weren't a God, is less likely than if we were to have a world like this, if God existed. And if that's the claim, it's unclear why that is.
That went over my head for some reason. I can't seem to wrap my head around that question. I'm sorry.
Look, there's a chance that the world has these conditions if God existed, and there's a probability of it happened if God didn't exist. You're claiming the probability it happens if God didn't exist is less likely than if it happened with a God. And if that's your claim, I'm asking what are the reasons to accept that?
I use deductive reasoning against the how else would it have happened? So then I begin to
wait. Hold on. You're saying it's less probable it happens on non-theism, and I'm asking you what's the support for that claim?
The mathematical probability of the Big Bang Theory and things happening by chance versus something purposing it to be in existence makes more sense to my mind.
Okay, makes more sense is different from a claim of probability, and purpose can actually be had in an atheistic worldview. So to be clear, we're not saying random or purpose, right? Because we're not even saying it's random, right? It can have a complete explanation on an atheistic picture. We're asking why the probability of it happening without a God is less likely than if it happened with a God.
The mathematical probability.
Yeah, the claim is the mathematical probability favors theism, and I'm asking, what's the support for that? Look, I can just say the probability that atheism is true if polar bears existed is greater than theism, right? And that's just like a random probability claim, right? Probability claims are not merely you just espousing this is more likely than that. You have to show them to me, right? You should be able to present like some probabilistic inference or process that's going on in which you generate those values where the value of theism is roughly larger than atheism.
Correct.
You don't just say it's more likely. Yeah, so how are you going to demonstrate to me that the probability it happens on theism is more likely than on atheism?
Okay, so if you go down the list, bullet point by bullet point, of the various components that made up our solar system, just our solar system, set in where it is, the gravitational pull on the various planets that holds and suspends the Earth in place, where and how the Earth is positioned, how it sets on its axis. There's a host of various things that have transpired to bring life consistently. And if it was more random, I would say maybe at 1,000 years.
We're not, but that's a mistake. That's a mistake already. We're not talking about random versus theism. We're saying atheism versus theism. So an atheist, it's consistent with the picture that nothing's random. So it's not random or theism, right? So if you're making an argument against a random type of view, that's not the view we're talking about. We're talking about why I think theism is more likely. It might be true that theism is more likely than a random series of events, right? But we're not talking about a random series of events. We're saying that the events that occur happen and the explanation is without theism.
It's getting deeper than I normally go. Could you phrase that in a way that would be a little more understandable to me?
I'm just saying that atheism doesn't comment on anything being random, right? It's not like like if I said John's a bachelor, it's an entailment from the view that John is unmarried, right? Because bachelor just means unmarried. But atheism doesn't entail anything's random, right? So you're arguing against a view that these happen by random chance. But atheism isn't the view it happens by random chance. It's just the view it happens without a God, which includes it being completely random, unrandom, right? Parts are random and other parts aren't, right? It doesn't specify anything about that. So It seems like you're targeting, at best, maybe a specific atheistic picture and not atheism generally. I'm asking you why I think the proposition theism is more likely than atheism, not some subset of theism, like a specific theism.
Right. I get what you're saying.
Because look, someone can have the view that atheism is true and John is a married bachelor, right? And that view is false because in order for that view to be true, both of those propositions have to be true. But one of the propositions is a contradiction, right? Because bachelor means unmarried and John's married, right? So that means he's married and unmarried. So that view is impossible. But that's not an argument against atheism, right? That's saying a specific view of atheism is impossible. And that might not even be anything in virtue of atheism whatsoever, right? So saying stuff about random isn't informative. We want to know why just the proposition there's no God explaining it is less likely. Also, I got to step aside, so I'm going to pass this back to Jack.
Okay. So, you there?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I actually have to end the live. I can try for 5 more minutes. I'm going to need to stay muted, though, but I'm going to need to end it eventually because I'm already going to be leaving the house.
You're going to visit your boyfriend?
Yeah, I'm going to his house.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, like, if you go back to the shoe-stealing fairies example, right? What I think we usually want is something more robust than an explanation which is designed to explain what it's constructed. We want something that does more than merely explains what it's designed to explain, right? And so we would want some kind of like, maybe like a novel prediction, for example. That would be something which would lead us to think that we had a really good explanation, rather than something that merely accommodates the data. Do you see what I mean?
Right.
Like a novel prediction or something like that.
Yep, there is none. The randomness, that I was outlining is, with atheism, I understand that there's a scientific explanation, but where I have a problem when I use the word random, I'm using it in the context of then if it was probable that the Earth can be set up in the solar system just so far away from the sun to establish life, then it would be duplicatable somewhere in the foreseeable eyesight of any of our telescopes.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't really see. It seems like you. It seems like you're just saying there's this improbable thing, and there's this being that wants that improbable thing and has the capacity to bring it about, which is just like the shoe-stealing fairy explanation.
I think the shoe theory fairies is something that would be much less probable than, say, the mathematics that it takes to put the solar system together in such a way as to sustain life. I mean, there's much more going into our solar system and the Earth and the bringing about of life.
Look, I don't see how you aren't just pushing the problem back, right? You're just saying there's a being that very improbably desires this thing. So there's an improbability there, right? With respect to the being's desires?
Well, we're dealing with, there's no definitive improbability versus an absolute probability. What we're dealing with is what's less likely versus more likely.
Hello.
Mason, you want to take a crack at it?
Is this the same guy since like 30 minutes ago?
Yeah.
That's me.
Oh, what is his
I don't know. He seems like he's trying to make some kind of fine-tuning, some kind of appeal to fine-tuning.
No, I lean away from.
It seems like a design argument. I'm gonna keep it real, Mason. Jack is struggling, so you got to help him out.
Okay, but so he's not doing a fine-tuning argument.
No.
Which is like the objectively better argument, and he's doing a design argument, which almost certainly doesn't work.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm saying. I'm saying something a little more unique. What I'm saying is after the Big Bang, okay, the Earth, the universe cooled and expanded and went out. I would want to see a duplicate of the Earth in some form of a solar system similar to ours that can sustain life like ours. I want justification for why in the hell this Earth is sitting where it is and able to sustain life, and we can't, with any of our high-powered telescopes, find anything like our Earth. That's my evidence for God.
So the evidence for God is that we have a world with life in it or something?
It's less probable it would happen by accident without a duplicate versus if there was a duplicate out there, I would say, wow, maybe the conditions were so ripe with the Big Bang that it kind of leaves God out of the equation. That there's a duplicate over there. So how could God be the sole source of the power and the infinite mind to put this solar system together?
Why is God the best explanation for that thing?
Probability.
Well, God's not the best explanation.
Well, tell me what it is. That's why I'm here. I'm here to debate.
Well, I'm just saying God's not because of probability.
That's your belief, but I believe that I have to make a rational decision.
No, but your belief
atheism
is wrong. But your belief is wrong.
Well, that's your opinion. You
No,
can't
it's a fact
factually
because of
disprove it.
it's a fact because of probability.
Well, outline it. I want to hear it.
Yeah, probability.
That's why I'm on here. I want to hear probability. I want to hear what you got to say.
Probability. So your everything you said is wrong because of probability.
That's you just saying it, but you can't prove it. I want to see the equation.
So you're saying just saying probability is just saying something. It's not like showing anything. Is that what you're saying, basically?
Exactly.
Oh, interesting. Okay, interesting. I was just trying to make sure.
Well, I'm looking at gravity. I'm looking at the math and the mechanics that goes into.
So if somebody were to ask you a question and you just said probability, that wouldn't be like showing anything, right? That would just be saying something.
Well, it would be an example of if I go to Vegas and I want to gamble, what's the probability that I would do better at the blackjack table versus the roulette wheel?
No, everything you just said is wrong.
Yeah, it's not. It
is wrong because look, I can show you because of probability.
Okay, show me.
I can show you. Look, probability.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Okay, you do. You got it now?
I see what you're saying. Okay. So when I say probability, let me break it down. When I look at a Ferrari, if there was no human beings on the earth, I would have a hard time believing that happened by chance versus intelligent design. Okay, that's how I'm justifying it. The earth is sitting how it's sitting and able to sustain life for thousands of years. And I don't believe that would happen by chance, probability-wise, any less than a Ferrari can appear out of nowhere from nothing.
Okay, well, suppose you think that... So if you think that the existence of life is evidence for God existing, okay? So that actually doesn't automatically mean that God existing is the best explanation for that fact. Because, if it's raining, okay, that's evidence for a rain creating unicorn, but it doesn't mean that a rain creating unicorn is the best explanation for that fact. Do you agree?
I agree.
Okay, so then there's an additional thing you need to show. So even if you have evidence for God existing, there's an additional thing, which is why I think God is the best explanation for that fact. Otherwise, you're not going to have a good reason to believe in God. You're just going to have some evidence for God existing.
I would want to see a duplicate. The fact that it's not
but saying that is not explaining how God is the best explanation for the fact.
Well, I either see an A or B scenario going on here. I don't see an A, B, or C. So what I'm saying is,
the rain is evidence. The rain is evidence for a rain making unicorn, right?
Well, I disagree with that because I don't believe in unicorns.
Okay, well, hold on. Do you think if you don't believe in unicorns, that means it's not evidence for rain making unicorns? Because then, if it was that easy, then monkeyboy could say, I disagree with that because I don't believe in God. But whether you believe in it or not, evidence just means that it's raises the likelihood of it being true. So it doesn't actually matter whether you believe in it or not. You can acknowledge that there's evidence for something and still not believe in it. Maybe there's evidence for it, but it's really unlikely to be true, or there's evidence for it, but there's evidence against it, or whatever.
Right. If that was it solely, I would agree with you. But we don't talk about these other things on this live, as far as me going into personal testimony and things of that nature. So,
I don't care about personal feeling stuff. I'm just trying to say that I don't think. Look, imagine there's let's just say there's something super improbable. I win the lottery 10 times in a row. Okay, so that's an extremely improbable event. I guess you could say that maybe the likelihood of that is just assume it's like a lottery of like a million people. So then it's like a million raised to 10. It's the probability of that happening. Okay, so, but now something that might explain that is, there's a fairy that it wants me to win and has arranged everything in a way that I can win or something like that. So that's one explanation. But that wouldn't be a very good explanation of that because that's also, it's really unlikely, arguably even more unlikely that there's that kind of fairy than me just winning all those lotteries, So even if there is something that's evidence for a hypothesis, if the hypothesis is also really implausible, then that's not going to be a very good reason to believe in a particular hypothesis. So there's kind of an additional burden where you want to show that, God is like a good candidate for an explanation. Like it's not too implausible that God exists or something like that.
Exactly. But here's the problem with that argument. I have to also flip the pancake over and look at it in the same light and judge it on the same criteria as atheism or creationism, or evolution.
Evolution? No, evolution is irrelevant. No, because you're concerned with the existence of life. Evolution wouldn't matter here.
I'm saying the Big Bang Theory. So
But a Big Bang Theory is not an alternative hypothesis to it. It's consistent with either side. Like you could, the Big Bang Theory is consistent with. It's not like an alternative that's inconsistent with like theism.
yeah, okay, then let me phrase it to you this way. I either, we have to judge it on the same grade scale that you just outlined as to whatever yous believe on how the solar system got set up to sustain life on this planet.
Well,
I have to
I'm
judge
just
it
thinking about your whatever. Okay, so I guess you're saying there's some kind of God. That versus the not God. There is no such thing. So
Correct.
like that versus like I guess some kind of like null hypothesis or just a direct negation of that.
Right.
And I'm saying that like just saying that you have evidence for a hypothesis isn't an automatic reason to believe in it, because really any observation you have will be evidence for an infinite amount of hypotheses. Everything you observe, no matter what it is or anything that's true, is evidence for a large range of hypotheses. And we obviously don't believe in the vast majority of that.
That's true. Now, let's flip it over. No matter how flat you're going to make this pancake, there's still two sides. The same is true with how you value the solar system and the universe got set up to sustain life on the planet. I've got to have some justification for how the hell this planet is sitting so close to the sun we're not burning up or freezing. I've got to justify that in my mind somehow. Now, it's either completely random and chance, okay, and evolution took place, the Big Bang Theory and evolution, things happened, and there's some credibility to that. But then I have to, in my mind, say I either am going to believe A or B. Okay.
Well, you don't have to. You could just be agnostic. Like
I
you
don't want to be agnostic. I don't want to be
whether you want to or not. I'm just talking about. I'm not necessarily saying what you want to. I'm just more so talking about like, I guess like basic epistemic rationality. Like you don't have to believe either like A or not A. You could just not believe either one.
Yeah, but that's not. See, I've only got a short period of time here, and let's hypothesize and say.
But you don't have to maximize. There's no idea where you're trying to like maximize the amounts of stances you take in some short amount of time. Like if you don't have enough evidence in one way or the other, you just be agnostic on it. Like
no, I don't do that. I don't live my life that way.
Okay, well then there's a deeper issue here. That's like there's an issue that goes beyond this conversation, which is that you live your life in a way where you're compelled to form beliefs on things even when you don't have good enough evidence. Either way.
Whoa! You're going a little outside of the boundaries there because you don't know me well enough to say that. What I'm saying
Well, you just said it to me. You just told me. You just said that I don't live my life in a way where I just like suspend judgment. Sometimes I either believe one thing or the other, and I'm just saying that's like a very ridiculous view. And that seems like that's something like if that's what you're committed to, then that's something that probably would need to be addressed before any conversation.
Wait a minute though. I mean, I wasn't heard out as to the full reason why I believe it isn't just the science side of the universe or our solar system in this Earth. That's one part of the equation for me. The other part is I have to test the theory out. See, and I did that. A lot of people don't do that. And they'll just say, well, I don't see the scientific rationale for believing in theism. Okay, and I can respect that. But then my biggest argument with the atheist is did you devote the same energy to prove God as you do to trying to disprove God? And almost always, no, I didn't expend the same amount of energy. It didn't make sense in my 5 cents knowledge justifying God being the creator. So I just dismissed it and I went on in my higher knowledge and learning to further disprove God. Well, that's not a fair assessment. Would you agree?
Would I agree? I'm not sure what you're calling unfair. I'm saying that it's what it sounded like you were saying is no, I can't be agnostic. I have to either believe in A or not A. So I'm not sure what. So that was my claim. I don't know if you're calling that unfair. Well, no, that's not unfair. Am I? So I was saying that was ridiculous. Am I correct about you? Or are you saying that I'm not going to be agnostic on anything? It's just A or not A. Wasn't that what you said?
Well, that's a private and personal opinion of mine.
Are you agnostic on do you have a view on quantum mechanics? Or?
I am a theist. I'm a Christian. So
No, but do you have a view on which interpretation of quantum mechanics is correct? Or?
No.
Okay, so you're agnostic on that. Okay, so you are agnostic on some things.
Well, but here's the thing. I expend my energies on what I find valuable to me. And once I reach a point, I don't go beyond that to try to prove or disprove. Once I've concluded the matter in my mind, I let it be. I mean, you could go on and on and on and infinitely explore it, but I find it to be a moot point. Similar to how atheists do. Once they've concluded that there is no deity, they don't expend a lot of time trying to understand Christianity or a deity. They spend
You
most
know,
of their
there are some things I want to say briefly though about, because I think you're saying you're not giving the fine tuning argument, and I think like there's good reason to think that life permitting constants are maybe improbable given the possible constants. Okay, their universe could have had, but you're saying that even given those constants, there's something unlikely about life even developing in like some kind of like habitable zone in the universe. And there's actually, as far as I can tell, no reason to think that given the constants, life is improbable. This is why typically people say that what's improbable is that we have life permitting constants in the first place. But given that we have life permitting constants, it's unclear why we would think that life is impermissible, much less life like ours. And that's about the science. I don't know if we want to talk about that for a bit. But
well, once I've concluded that matter, that theism made more sense to me, then I went on to prove
I don't even think he's really listening to anything, so I'm not really sure.
Well, I'm explaining myself.
Yeah, I'm gonna kick him off.
I gotta end.
Okay.
All right, peace out.